My name is Emily Harris. I'm 30, an English teacher in North Carolina, and I've always trusted my family far beyond the point of reason. I thought parents protect you, cherish you, keep pieces of your childhood safe like treasure. But mine? They sold my childhood bedroom, posters, books, window seat, and all, just to fund my sister's wedding. And what they didn't know was that the deed to the house was already in my pocket. Before I dive in, please like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Tell me, has family ever betrayed you in ways you never saw coming? Share in the comments where you're watching from. I'll be reading every single one. It happened on an ordinary Sunday. I had driven home from Raleigh, an hour on the highway, windows rolled down, the scent of spring clover thick in the air. I'd been humming along to the radio, thinking about grading essays when I arrived. But the second I stepped into the house on Sycamore Street, I froze. Boxes, stacked neatly in the hallway. My handwriting on some, my sister's on others, and a stranger's voice drifting from upstairs. Yeah, this'll make a fine nursery. Plenty of light. I set my bag down slowly. Mom, my voice trembled. What's going on? She appeared in the doorway of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her eyes bright, as if nothing was wrong. Oh, Emily, you're early. Who's upstairs? She hesitated. The couple is buying the room. Your father's showing them around. The words punched the air out of my lungs. Buying the room? Her smile didn't falter, but her tone sharpened. For Megan's wedding, sweetheart. It's just practical. She deserves a proper start. I stumbled up the stairs, heart hammering. My room, the sanctuary I'd grown up in, the place where I'd hidden under covers during storms, where I taped poems to the wall, where I wrote my first stories, looked stripped. The posters were gone. The desk cleared. My old window seat, the one I used to curl into with a book, sat bare. And in the center, a young couple smiled at my father, who gestured broadly like a realtor. Plenty of space, he said. We'll have it cleared before the wedding, I blurted. This is my room. The couple glanced at me awkwardly. My father's jaw tightened. Emily, don't start. Don't start? I whispered. You're selling my childhood for flowers and centerpieces? Megan's laughter drifted from the hallway, sweet and cutting all at once. Oh, Em, don't be dramatic. It's just a room. You don't even live here anymore. That had always been the script. Megan, the golden child, perfect grades, perfect fiancé, the center of every holiday. Me, the practical one, the afterthought. When she wanted a car, they co-signed the loan. When she wanted to study abroad for a semester, they drained their savings. When I wanted grad school, I got a pat on the shoulder. Loans build character. And now, when she wanted a wedding dripping in roses and crystal chandeliers, they sold the last piece of me that still lived in that house. I left before the couple could finish their tour, slamming the door behind me, my chest heaving. That night, back in my apartment in Raleigh, I pulled open the bottom drawer of my desk and retrieved the envelope I hadn't touched in months. The one from my grandmother's lawyer, inside the deed. The house deed, transferred quietly to me before she passed, because she knew. She had whispered once, Emily, you're the one they'll forget, so I'll make sure you have something they can't take. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. My name, my house, my room. And suddenly, their betrayal wasn't just cruel. It was illegal. I stared at the deed under the dim light of my desk lamp, heart steadying, a spark flickering beneath the heartbreak. They thought I was powerless. That I'd let them erase me for Megan's fairy tale day. But I wasn't powerless. Not anymore. Because the deed in my pocket was sharper than any knife, and I was ready to use it. When I tell people my parents sold my childhood room, they assume it must have been a cold house. A place where love didn't live. But that's the part that hurts the most, because it wasn't. Not at first. The Harris house on Sycamore Street wasn't just wood and brick. It was where Sunday pancakes filled the kitchen with the smell of vanilla, where my father strummed old country songs on the porch, his boots tapping against the railing, where my mother hummed as she folded laundry, her voice soft, almost prayerful. It was the house where my grandmother lived with us until she passed. She kept peppermints in her pocket, and when Megan and I fought, she'd separate us with that look, the kind that could slice through the noisiest storm. To the outside world, we looked whole, ordinary, safe, but inside, the cracks had already started to crawl. Megan, my younger sister, was born 3 years after me, and from the moment she took her first breath, the family shifted. I was the careful one, the reader, the planner. But Megan? She had a laugh that made neighbors turn their heads, a smile teachers couldn't resist, a flair for the dramatic that drew attention like a magnet. At Christmas, if I unwrapped socks, Megan unwrapped jewelry. At birthdays, if I got a cake from the grocery store, Megan got one shaped like a tiara. I don't think my parents even realized what they were doing. It wasn't cruelty. It was worship, and every time I swallowed disappointment, I told myself the same thing. They love her differently. Not more, but different over the years. Differences can carve deep wounds. My room was my refuge. Posters of poets and rock bands. A bookshelf sagging with worn spines. The window seat with faded cushions where I scribbled stories into notebooks until my hand cramped. Grandma used to knock softly before entering. She'd sit on the edge of my bed, smoothing the quilt she'd stitched herself, and say, "This room will always be yours, Emily. A girl needs a place where the world can't touch her." Those words rooted in me like scripture. And even after I moved to Raleigh for work, every visit home meant retreating to that room, breathing in the faint lavender scent of old curtains, tracing my initials carved into the desk. It was proof that I still belonged. So when I walked in that Sunday and saw strangers measuring the walls, I didn't just lose furniture. I lost proof of my place in the family. The obsession with Megan's wedding didn't surprise me. She had been engaged 3 months, and already my parents spoke of it like a royal coronation. "Nothing but the best," Mom cooed on the phone one night. "Whatever it takes," Dad added. And whatever it takes turned out to mean selling pieces of me. I thought back to Grandma's last months, how she whispered to me about fairness, about watching out for myself. She must have known, must have seen how Megan's shadow swallowed me whole. That's why she left me the deed. Not as favoritism, but as balance, protection. The signs had been there, like storm clouds ignored. At Thanksgiving, Dad toasted Megan's engagement with expensive champagne, while my promotion to department head earned a distracted, "That's nice, honey." At Christmas, Megan unwrapped a diamond tennis bracelet while I got a sweater 2 sizes too small. And on New Year's Eve, when Megan announced she wanted her wedding at the same country club my parents could never afford, Mom clapped her hands and said, "We'll find a way." I remember whispering, "How?" She smirked. "You don't need to worry about it, Emily." Looking back, that was the moment I should have known. That smirk, that dismissal. Because when someone tells you not to worry, what they really mean is, "We've already decided, and your feelings don't matter." I didn't realize then what finding a way would cost me. But I was about to learn. My childhood wasn't sacred. It was collateral. The Sunday after I discovered strangers in my room, I drove back to Sycamore Street. My tote bag with the deed felt heavier than bricks in the passenger seat. I hadn't told anyone. Not yet. Not Mom, not Dad, not Megan, but silence I knew couldn't last. The family gathered for dinner like nothing had changed. Roast chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes. Mom fussed over Megan, piling food onto her plate, while I sat quietly, the fork in my hand shaking. "So," Dad said, "Megan met with the florist today." "White roses. Classic. They'll need half the budget." Megan laughed. "Half the budget for flowers, the other half for the band." They all chuckled. I set my fork down. "And where does the money come from?" Mom's eyes flicked to mine, sharp. "Don't ruin dinner, Emily." "I'm just asking." Megan smirked. "It's not your problem. You're not the one getting married," I whispered. "No, I'm just the one losing everything for it." The table went silent. Dad cleared his throat. "Don't be selfish, Em. Your sister deserves a proper start." And there it was again. That word. Selfish. as if wanting a piece of my childhood was greed, while funding a $50,000 wedding was virtue. After dinner, I walked upstairs, stopping outside the bathroom. Megan's voice floated through the half-closed door, hushed but gleeful. She's going to lose it when the room's gone for good. Another voice, her fiancé, Matt. Do you think she'll fight it? She won't, she never does. Emily folds. That's her thing. I pressed my hand against the wall, nails digging into plaster. Fold. That was how they saw me. Not a sister. Not a daughter. Just someone who bent until she disappeared. And maybe they were right. Until now. That night, I climbed to the attic while they all slept. Dust clung to the beams, the faint smell of cedar filling the air. I dug through boxes, searching for pieces of myself they hadn't touched. Photos, journals, old-school essays. Grandma's quilt. I pressed the fabric to my face, tears soaking into the stitches. Her words echoed in my memory. They'll forget you, Emily. Protect yourself. I whispered. I am, Grandma. I will. Over the next week, the phone calls came like clockwork. Mom. Emily, can you chip in for the catering? Just a little. Me. I'm already paying student loans, Mom. Mom. Megan never complains. Dad. The band deposit is due. Megan wants the 12-piece orchestra. Me. That's thousands, Dad. Dad, ZX. Stop thinking small. This is family. And Megan. Always Megan. She texted me a photo of a dress dripping with crystals. Can you believe it? Daddy says we can make it work. I stared at the screen, bile rising. They weren't making it work. They were trying to sell me on buying her sparkle. The final straw came on a Wednesday night. I dropped by unannounced, walking into the house just as Megan sat at the kitchen table, flipping through a wedding binder. "Em," she said, her tone dripping false sweetness. "You'll sit in the back, right?" Close to the exit. "Less pressure," I froze. "What?" "For the ceremony," she continued, smirking. "Front rows are for important guests." "You understand," Dad chuckled. Mom smiled tightly, and I felt my chest hollow out. I turned to leave, fury buzzing in my veins when I spotted a folder half hidden beneath Megan's binder. Bold black letters stamped across the cover, "Contract of sale." I froze, breath caught in my throat. They hadn't just talked about selling my childhood. They were already signing it away. And that was when I knew. The betrayal wasn't coming. It was already here. The folder on the table burned into my eyes. Contract of sale. My hands trembled as I reached for it, but before I could, Megan slapped her palm down, pinning it in place. "Don't snoop," she smirked. "You'll find things you don't like." Dad's voice boomed from behind me. "Emily, put that down. This is family business." My throat tightened. Family business? This is my room, my things, my childhood. Mom crossed her arms, calm as if we were discussing grocery lists. "You don't live here anymore. Megan's wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime event. We all have to sacrifice," I whispered. Why is it always me who has to sacrifice? 2 nights later, the betrayal went public. We were gathered in the living room for what Mom called a family update. Megan sat glowing in her chair, engagement ring catching the light, while Dad cleared his throat dramatically. "We've done it," he said, puffing his chest. The last piece fell into place. With the money from selling Emily's old room, Megan will have her dream wedding. Paid in full. The room erupted in applause from relatives who'd been invited over. Megan squealed, throwing her arms around Mom, and I sat frozen. "A toast," Dad boomed, raising his glass. "To Megan's future." Everyone clinked. No one looked at me. Aunt Linda leaned over, whispering too loudly. "It's just a room, Emily. Don't sulk." Megan smirked at me from across the room. "Come on, sis." Try to smile. This is a family victory. I forced a laugh that sounded like glass breaking. My chest hollowed out, my pulse thundered. They had sold me, erased me, and celebrated my disappearance like it was an achievement. I stood suddenly, my chair scraping against the hardwood, Do you hear yourselves? You're cheering because you sold my life away. Silence fell. Dozens of eyes turned toward me. Dad's face darkened. Don't ruin this, Emily, Mom hissed under her breath. You're embarrassing yourself. Megan tilted her head, smirk widening. Poor Emily. Always so dramatic. You'd think she was the one getting married. Laughter rippled. Not from everyone, but enough. It felt like knives in my skin. I fled to the kitchen, my vision blurring, my lungs tight. On the counter sat the contract again, this time with a note clipped to it. Payment received in full. Transfer to be completed before the wedding. The words swam in front of me. It wasn't just an idea anymore. The deal was already done. My room was gone. I drove back to Raleigh in the middle of the night, headlights slicing the dark, tears streaking my face. Every mile felt like a nail hammered into a coffin. By the time I stumbled into my apartment, I collapsed against the door, whispering, "They chose her. Again." I pulled out the deed from my desk drawer, gripping it until the paper crumpled. My grandmother's handwriting, her signature. It was my lifeline, proof that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't powerless. But right then, it didn't feel like power. It felt like a last memory clutched by someone who'd just been erased. I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, the contract and deed side by side on my nightstand. One said I was nothing. The other said I owned everything, and I knew. Something had to break. But first, it would be me. For 3 days after the family toast, I barely left my apartment. The blinds stayed shut. Dishes piled in the sink. My phone buzzed nonstop with texts from cousins. Emily, don't be dramatic. You'll understand one day when it's your turn. You should be happy for Megan. Each buzz was another blade. I muted them all. I dragged myself to the marketing office. But my work felt hollow. Colors on my screen blurred into gray. Campaigns that once sparked pride now looked like noise. My boss asked, "Rough week?" I forced a smile. Just tired, but inside, I was unraveling. At lunch, I sat in my car, scrolling photos of my old bedroom, the window seat where I used to read, the scratched dresser Dad built, the mural I painted one summer. Gone. Sold for centerpieces and a DJ. Nights were worse. I'd lie in bed, staring at the deed on my nightstand. My grandmother's signature stared back at me, steady while I shook. I whispered, "Why wasn't I enough to protect?" The silence answered louder than any words. On the 4th day, my mom called. "Emily, stop sulking," she said, her tone clipped. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I bit back tears. "You sold my childhood," she sighed. "It's just a room. Megan's happiness is more important than dusty memories." My chest heaved. "More important than me?" Silence, then click. She hung up. I sank to the kitchen floor, phone in my lap, sobbing into my hands. This was it. My breaking point. I'd been erased from my own family's story, replaced, laughed at, humiliated, and part of me wanted to let it happen. To curl small and disappear, because maybe they were right. Maybe I was just dramatic. Maybe I was nothing. That night, Eric stopped by unannounced. My best friend since college, the one who'd always seen through me. He took one look at my swollen eyes and whispered, "They broke you." I nodded, tears spilling fresh. They chose her. They always choose her. He crouched, his hands firm on my shoulders. "So what? You gonna let them keep choosing her until you vanish?" I shook my head weakly. "What else can I do? They've already won." Eric leaned closer, voice low, steady. "Emily, you're sitting on the deed. Do you hear me? They think they erased you, but you're holding the match that could burn their whole fairy tale down." His words cracked something inside me. Not enough to rebuild, but enough to stop the freefall. I stared at the crumpled deed on the table, my grandmother's signature glowing under the lamplight. They thought they'd silenced me. That I'd stay the quiet daughter, the one who gave up everything without a fight. But maybe silence wasn't safe anymore. Maybe silence was surrender. I wiped my face, sat up straighter, and whispered to myself, I won't stay broken. And for the first time in days, I believed it. The morning after Eric's visit, I stood in front of the mirror. My face still blotchy from tears, but my eyes clearer than they'd been in weeks. I whispered to my reflection, You won't stay broken. You're going to make them see. And for the first time, the woman staring back didn't look powerless. She looked like someone waiting for the right strike. I pulled the deed from my nightstand, smoothing out the wrinkles. My grandmother's handwriting, her neat loops and sharp strokes, made my chest ache. They thought they could sell my room because they believed I had nothing. But I had this. I made copies, dozens. Printed, scanned, and saved to multiple drives. One is locked in my desk drawer. Another was tucked into a file at work. A third with Eric, who promised, If they try to bury you, I'll make sure this sees daylight. It wasn't just a piece of paper anymore. It was armor. After work, I drove to the county clerk's office. The air smelled faintly of ink and dust, the hum of old computers filling the space. Property transfer records, I said at the counter, my voice calm though my hands trembled. The clerk printed the documents. My stomach flipped when I saw it in black and white. The house title moved into my father's sole name 2 weeks before the engagement party. 2 weeks. They'd planned it. My room wasn't sold in desperation. It was sold for Megan's fairy tale wedding. I swallowed hard and tucked the papers into my bag. Evidence. I didn't want revenge to look like bitterness. I wanted the truth. Truth so sharp it couldn't be denied. So I called Kenzie, my cousin who'd always been the black sheep, the one Megan called reckless. When I told her what happened, she laughed bitterly. Of course. Megan gets the crown, you get crumbs. Not this time, I said quietly. She agreed to help. You need eyes and ears? I'll sit at their bridal showers and smile while feeding you everything. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Not broken. Not erased. Dangerous. If my parents and Megan wanted a performance, they'd get one. But it would be mine. The wedding wasn't just a family affair. It was practically a social event. Invitations had gone out to half the town, old friends, distant relatives, even Mom's church circle. That was my stage. The perfect place to reveal not just their betrayal, but the receipts. I could already see it. The room dressed in flowers paid for with my stolen room. The laughter of people celebrating Megan's perfect day, and me standing with the deed in hand. The one thing they couldn't erase. But planning revenge isn't just rage. It's patience. I spent nights organizing everything into a binder. Copies of the deed, property transfer records, timelines. I practiced what I'd say, whispered into the mirror until the words stopped shaking. Eric teased, You're like a lawyer prepping for trial. I smirked. Good, because this is my case, and they're guilty. One evening, I sat on my balcony, flipping through the binder. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky orange. From inside, my phone buzzed with a text from Megan. Hey, sis, hope you're not still sulking. I want you front row at the wedding. It'll mean so much to me. My chest tightened. She didn't want me there out of love. She wanted me there to witness her victory. I typed back one word. Front, and I meant it. Front row, holding the truth. I closed the binder, heart steady, breath calm. The trap was set. They just didn't know they'd already walked into it. Revenge isn't a single blow. It's a series of careful strikes. Small enough to seem like a coincidence, sharp enough to make them bleed confidence. And my first strike came sooner than I expected. Megan's bridal shower was hosted at Aunt Claire's house, complete with pastel balloons, gold lettering on the cake, and a tower of gifts taller than a toddler. When I walked in, Megan smirked like she'd already won. Emily, she said, her tone sweet and sharp. Glad you could make it. I was worried you might still be upset about the room. A few heads turned. My cheeks burned, but I forced a smile. Oh, don't worry, I said, keeping my voice calm. I brought something better than a gift. Gasps rippled when I pulled out a framed photo of my childhood bedroom, the same one they'd sold off for her wedding fund. The window light streaming in, my books on the shelves, the quilt Grandma had sewn. I placed it on the gift table. A memory, I said simply. Since some of us can't make new ones. The room fell into uneasy silence. Megan's smile twitched, her eyes narrowing just enough for me to see the crack. Aunt Claire muttered under her breath. That was... Pointed, Megan snapped, her voice brittle. You're so dramatic, Emily. Always have been. I shrugged, sipping punch. Or maybe I just remember what matters. The whispers started then. Not loud, but enough. And I knew. First strike landed. 2 days later, I visited the florist, Maribel, a kind woman who'd known our family for years. When she spotted me, she said gently, Your mother was in last week. She mentioned selling your room for Megan's centerpieces. I thought she was exaggerating. I handed her a copy of the deed. She wasn't exaggerating, but she was lying. That room was mine. Her eyes widened. Emily, if this gets out, I leaned in, voice steady. It will, but not yet. For now, I just want you to know who really paid for those flowers. By the time I left, I knew Maribel would talk. Vendors always do. Sunday dinners had always been sacred in our house. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and the soft hum of my mom's radio in the background. But this dinner was different. Dad barely looked at me, his fork scraping against his plate. Mom filled the silence with chatter about Megan's dream wedding. Finally, Megan leaned back and sighed dramatically. It's just hard making everything perfect when people aren't supportive. Her eyes slid to me. I placed my fork down slowly. Supportive? You sold my room for your flowers. Dad slammed his fist on the table. Enough, Emily, we did what we had to do. Megan deserves this wedding. My chest tightened, but I didn't flinch. And what did I deserve? To be erased? The silence that followed was louder than any argument. Mom stammered, You'll understand when it's your turn. I smiled coldly. If it ever is, I'll remember how this family defines sacrifice. Megan scoffed. God, you sound pathetic. Always the victim. I leaned forward, whispering. Victims don't carry deeds in their pocket. Dad's fork clattered to the table. His face paled. He knew. By midweek, I started hearing things. Kenzie texted me. Megan's bridesmaids are whispering. Something about you having receipts. What did you do? I smirked at my phone. Receipts. The best word for truth. At work, a coworker who knew my family said casually, So, did your folks really sell your room? That's harsh. The story was spreading. Not the full plan, not the reveal. Just the whispers, the cracks in their perfect facade, and Megan hated it. One evening, leaving the grocery store, I heard heels clicking behind me. Megan's voice sharp and furious. Stop spreading lies about us. I turned slowly, meeting her glare. Lies or memories you'd rather erase? She hissed. You're jealous. That's all this is. I stepped closer, my voice low but firm. If I were jealous, I'd want what you have. But Megan, I don't want a wedding paid for with someone else's room. Her lips trembled. For once, she had no comeback. I walked away, leaving her standing in the harsh glow of the parking lot lights. That night, I lay in bed, clutching the deed. The small strikes were working. Megan was cracking. My parents were rattled. The whispers were spreading, but these were just tremors. The real earthquake was still to come. The morning of Megan's wedding felt like the air itself was holding its breath. The sky was clear, the church bells polished, the guests arriving in their best pastel dresses and sharp suits. From the outside, it looked like perfection. On the inside, I carried a storm in my pocket. The deed. Crisp. Heavy. My armor. I slipped into a pew halfway down the aisle, heart thundering. People nodded politely, some whispering. I caught the curious looks. Yes, that's Emily, the sister. The one with the rumors swirling around her? I didn't care. Let them wonder. When Megan swept in on Dad's arm, lace trailing behind her, the room gasped. She looked radiant, smug, triumphant. Her eyes met mine. A smirk curved her lips, daring me to break. I didn't blink. The priest began the vows, words rolling like waves in the still air. Megan's fiancé, sweet, nervous, oblivious, looked at her like she hung the moon. I almost pitied him. Almost. When it came to Megan's turn, her voice rang strong, practiced. I promised to honor, to cherish, to build a future. That was my cue. I stood. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. Head swiveled. Gasps rippled. The priest faltered. "Miss, please sit down." Megan's eyes widened, panic flickering beneath her practiced calm. "Emily, don't you dare!" I stepped into the aisle, pulling the folded deed from my pocket. My voice shook at first, but then it steadied. "You want vows, Megan? Let me give you one. I vow not to let lies go unspoken." The room went silent. My parents stiffened in the front pew. I held up the paper. "This is the deed to the house you all grew up in. The one my parents signed away, my childhood room included, to pay for this spectacle." Murmurs exploded. People leaned forward, whispering. I looked at the crowd, then back at Megan. They erased me to make her the star. Sold my space, my memories, my place in this family, for flowers and a dress. My voice cracked but grew sharper. "And you," I turned to Megan, "you wore my erasure like a crown." Gasps filled the church. Mom stood, her voice trembling. "Emily, stop this." "Not here," I snapped back. "Where else, Mother?" You erased me in silence. You thought I'd disappear quietly. But here I am. Dad's face flushed crimson. "Put that paper away." I held it higher. "No, everyone deserves to see what you did. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed every value you ever preached about family." The groom blinked rapidly, looking from Megan to me. "Megan, is this true?" Her voice faltered, brittle. "She's just jealous." "She's lying." I tossed the deed onto the altar. It landed with a slap that echoed in the hushed church. "Check the signatures," I said coldly. "It's not jealousy. It's true." For the first time, Megan's mask shattered. She lunged toward me, her veil slipping, her voice shrieking. "You couldn't stand me being happy. You always had to ruin everything." The groom stepped back, shock etched on his face. Guests gasped. A child in the back started crying. I stood tall. "No, Megan, I'm not ruining your happiness. I'm showing everyone what it's built on. My loss, my silence, my erasure. And I won't stay erased." Whispers turned into open outrage. "I can't believe they did that." "Sold her room? For this wedding?" "Disgusting." Aunt Claire shook her head, muttering. I knew something was wrong. The groom's mother stood, furious. "You let us walk into this blind, Megan. Shameful." Megan's fiancé whispered, broken, "Did you know?" Her silence was louder than any denial. I gathered the deed from the altar, folding it carefully. My hand shook, but my spine was steel. I'm done being the quiet daughter. If family means sacrificing one child for another's party, then maybe this isn't family after all. And with that, I walked down the aisle, not like a bridesmaid, not like a guest, like someone who had taken control. The whispers followed me out the church doors. Some pitying, some admiring, all watching. Outside the sun was blinding. I inhaled deeply, my chest heaving. But before I could take a full step into freedom, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. "Emily, wait!" I turned. It wasn't Megan. It wasn't Mom or Dad. It was the groom. His eyes were dark with betrayal. His next words would decide whether Megan's whole future collapsed that very day. "Emily, wait!" I turned on the church steps, the summer sun glaring down. And there he was, the groom. His tie crooked, his face pale, betrayal etched in every line. Guests spilled onto the lawn behind him, buzzing like angry bees. Some clutched programs to their chests, others whispered furiously. The perfect wedding Megan had dreamed of was unraveling strand by strand, right there in front of the whole town. He stumbled toward me, voice trembling. "Is it true? Everything you said in there, about the room, the money, the lies?" I didn't flinch. Every word. His eyes darted back to Megan, who stood frozen in the church doorway, veil askew, mascara streaking her cheeks. She looked less like a bride and more like a cornered animal, he whispered, voice breaking. How could she do this? How could they? I shook my head. Greed, entitlement. They thought silence was easier than truth. Until now. He swallowed hard, then turned, facing Megan, the guests, the altar that still held the flowers paid for with my erasure. His voice carried stronger now. This wedding is off. Gasps ripped through the crowd. Someone dropped a champagne glass. It shattered on the stone. Megan screamed, high-pitched and feral. You can't do this. Not in front of everyone. But he didn't waver. He pulled off the ring, dropped it at her feet, and walked away. Mom chased after him, sobbing. Please, she didn't mean... He cut her off, voice sharp. You raised a liar. And you covered for her. Don't expect me to marry into that. Dad stood rigid, fists clenched, face gray. For once, his booming voice failed him. And Megan, my sister, the golden child, the one they'd sacrificed me for, collapsed on the church steps, screaming my name like it was a curse. You ruined me, Emily. You ruined everything. I met her gaze, calm. No, Megan, you did that yourself. I just pulled back the curtain. The whispers had turned to judgment, open and loud, disgraceful. Selling her room? Who does that? Poor Emily, treated like nothing. They deserved to be exposed. Aunt Claire crossed her arms, shaking her head. I always knew they favored Megan. But this is unforgivable. The vendors, too, began murmuring, Maribel the florist, the caterer, the DJ. Their unpaid invoices had been the cracks I slipped my fingers into. Now the whole facade collapsed. One by one, people left. Not with joy, not with celebration. With disgust. By evening, the church was empty. Just me, my parents, and Megan sitting slumped in her ruined dress. Mom's voice was sharp, cutting. How could you humiliate us like that? Like this family means nothing to you, I laughed bitterly, voice shaking. This family? You sold my space, my memories, my place at the table for flowers and cake. You humiliated yourselves. Dad's face darkened. We did it for Megan. She deserved... I cut him off. She deserved nothing more than what I deserved. But you chose her. You always chose her. Megan sobbed. Why can't you just be happy for me? My voice cracked, but I forced it steady. Because happiness built on betrayal isn't happiness. It's theft. That night, I sat in my tiny apartment, the deed spread across my kitchen table. My hands trembled as I traced the signatures, the proof of everything. For years, I'd carried the weight of being the quiet one. The one who let things slide. The one who stayed silent. Not anymore. The whispers in town would keep spreading. My parents' reputation would keep crumbling. Megan's fairy tale wedding would be remembered not for flowers and lace, but for betrayal exposed at the altar. And me? For the first time, I wasn't erased. I was undeniable. As I folded the deed back into its envelope, my phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. You won today. But don't forget, truth makes enemies. Be ready. I froze, staring at the screen, because exposing my family might not have been the end. It might have been the beginning of a much bigger war. The morning after the wedding that wasn't, the world felt strangely quiet. No more lace, no more flowers, no more pretending. Just truth, raw and unpolished, settling like dust after an explosion. My phone rang endlessly that week. Aunt Claire, sympathetic. You were brave, Emily. Someone had to say it. Vendors, relieved. Thank you for speaking up. We thought we'd never see our money. Even old classmates messaged. I always knew your parents treated you unfairly. Good for you. But the calls from my parents? Those I didn't answer. The voicemails dripped with blame. Mom, tearful, you've destroyed this family. Dad, furious, you'll regret humiliating us. Megan, shrieking, you ruined my life. I deleted them all, because I finally understood. I wasn't the one who broke this family. They did, piece by piece, every time they chose her over me. In town, the story spread like wildfire. Megan's wedding collapse was the talk of the diner, the grocery store, and the post office. People clucked their tongues. Imagine selling one child's room for another's wedding. Others whispered pity. Emily never had a chance in that house. And slowly, something shifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. I was seen, not as the quiet one, not as the forgotten one, as the truth teller, the survivor. Megan's fiancé never came back. The engagement was dead, the ring pawned, the invitations burned. She became the story everyone whispered about, not the golden bride, but the sister who stole, lied, and crumbled in public. She tried to spin it, of course. Emily exaggerated. Emily twisted things, but the deed was undeniable. The vendors spoke. The whispers became facts, and Megan's crown slipped for good. As for Mom and Dad, they kept their distance. Their pride was too deep to admit wrong, their shame too raw to face me. But I didn't need their apology anymore. Because the moment I held that deed in the church, I realized something I should have known long ago. Validation doesn't come from people who profit from your silence. It comes from within. I moved on. I rented a new apartment. Small, quiet, but mine. I filled it with the books and photos that once lined my childhood room. I bought a quilt that reminded me of Grandma's, and one night sitting by the window, I whispered to myself, "They sold my room." But they didn't sell me. For the first time, I believed it. Betrayal cuts deep, but it also carves space for strength you didn't know you had. My parents thought they could erase me for Megan's spotlight. Instead, they lit the fire that made me stronger. I didn't just survive. I reclaimed myself. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Tell me, would you forgive betrayal like this, or would you walk away forever? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading everyone.